Before I begin, I need to make something clear. The names in my story aren't real. I've changed them because it's easier to share when I don't have to see my own name tied to every mistake. But the regret? That part is very, painfully real. This is the story of how I let go of a man who loved me more than anyone else ever could, and how I realized it far too late. My name is Emily. I'm 39 years old, and I was married to Daniel for almost 14 years. Saying was instead of still feels strange, like I'm talking about someone else's life instead of mine. But I guess that's what happens when you slowly drift out of love and don't even notice when it started. When I first met Daniel, he wasn't the loudest or flashiest guy in the room, but he was steady. He worked construction, had his own truck, paid his bills, and carried himself with this grounded confidence that drew me in. I used to tell my friends he was solid, the kind of man you could lean on when the world felt unstable. And in those first years, we were magic together. Late-night movies, weekend road trips, staying up texting each other like teenagers. He made me laugh, and I made him blush. We weren't perfect, but we were us, messy, playful, full of possibility. Then, somewhere around year 7, something changed. It wasn't a single moment, it was slow, creeping. I stopped laughing at his jokes, not because they weren't funny, but because I was already distracted, already elsewhere in my head. He'd kiss me on the neck when I was scrolling through my phone, and instead of leaning into it, I'd flinch. He thought it was stress from my job at the school, and maybe it was at first. I was working late nights, managing endless meetings, coming home drained. He picked up the slack at home, cooking, folding laundry, even running my bath. Most women would have killed for that kind of husband. But instead of pulling me closer, it made me feel smothered, like his kindness was a mirror reflecting what I couldn't give back. And the bedroom? That dried up too. Months passed without intimacy. He would bring it up gently, telling me he missed us, and I'd give some excuse about being tired or not in the mood. The truth was uglier. I just didn't feel that desire for him anymore, and I hated myself for it. He kept trying though, planning trips, surprising me with little gestures, even renting a cabin one weekend just to reconnect. I remember sitting by the fire, scrolling through my phone, while he tried to pull me closer. And the words slipped out of my mouth before I could stop them. Can you not? I just want to be left alone. The look on his face that night should have been enough to snap me back, but it didn't. If anything, it made me withdraw further. Every time he reached out, it felt like pressure. Every kiss, every compliment, every hopeful glance only reminded me of how far apart we'd drifted, like standing in the same room but on opposite sides of a canyon. I thought if I kept my distance, maybe he'd stop noticing. Maybe he'd stop trying. But Daniel wasn't the type to quit. He held on, held us together, even when I was already halfway gone. The breaking point came on a random Thursday. He sat down beside me while I was watching my crime shows and said, "Do you think we could talk after this episode?" I muted the TV, already annoyed, and snapped, "What is it now?" He looked at me with those tired eyes and whispered, "I miss being close to you. I miss us." And without hesitation, I said it. I have no desire for intimacy. Not with you. I just don't feel that way anymore. The silence that followed was heavier than anything I'd ever felt. He didn't yell. He didn't cry. He just stared at me, like he was seeing the truth for the first time. Then, without a word, he packed a bag and walked out the door. I didn't ask where he was going. I didn't even get up from the couch. I just unmuted the TV, as if nothing had happened. But inside, something cracked. Not a sharp snap, more like a quiet tearing I couldn't undo. Because deep down, I knew I'd just ended my marriage in the coldest way possible. The sound of the front door closing behind Daniel that night has never left me. It wasn't slammed. It wasn't angry. It was quiet, final. And that kind of silence cuts deeper than any shouting match ever could. I sat there on the couch, the glow of the TV flickering across the room, pretending to watch. But my mind wasn't on the screen. My chest felt heavy, my stomach twisting, like I had swallowed something sharp. I had wanted him to stop pressuring me, to stop asking for closeness I couldn't give, but I never imagined he'd actually leave. Minutes passed. Maybe hours. I don't even remember. But when headlights flashed outside, I pulled the curtain back just enough to see his truck backing out of the driveway. My heart skipped when I saw another car pull up at the same time. It was Rachel, my best friend since college. She hopped out in pajama pants and a hoodie, her hair tied up, a bottle of wine in her hand. She must have seen Daniel driving away, because instead of coming to the door, she walked straight toward his truck. I panicked. My throat went dry. Something told me she wasn't just checking on him, she knew. And sure enough, when I saw her lean against his window, talking to him like she'd been waiting for this moment, my chest clenched. I couldn't hear their words, but I could feel the weight of them. Her body language, the way she looked at him, the way he didn't drive off right away, it all told me that she was saying things I never had the courage to admit. Jealousy? No, it was something worse.
Fear.
Fear that my best friend might be the one to give him the comfort I refused. When she finally walked back to her car and Daniel drove off, I wanted to scream. Instead, I sank to the floor, my head in my hands. What had I done? I had pushed him so far that he found comfort in someone else's honesty. That night, I barely slept. I tossed and turned, staring at the empty side of the bed, my mind racing with every word I had thrown at him over the past year. The rejection, the sighs, the eye rolls, the flinches. They replayed like a cruel highlight reel. In between, memories forced themselves in, him tracing lazy circles on my back when I couldn't sleep, singing off-key in the kitchen just to make me laugh. I had smothered the very things I used to love. By morning, my phone buzzed with texts I wasn't ready to face. One from Daniel's buddy asking if he was okay. Another from Rachel, just 3 words. Are you alright? I couldn't bring myself to reply. Later that day, I finally got a text from Daniel himself. 3 short messages. Where are you? Seriously? You're being dramatic.
Dramatic.
That's what I called him for years whenever he tried to talk about his feelings. And now he was throwing the word back at me. Except this time, he wasn't the one begging for attention. He was gone. I stared at the messages, my hands trembling, and for the first time, panic set in like a tide I couldn't hold back. Panic that maybe he wasn't coming back. Panic that maybe my safe, steady husband had finally stopped fighting for us. That evening, I drove past the house where I thought he might be staying, but his truck wasn't there. The driveway was empty. For the first time in our marriage, I had no idea where my husband was, or who he was with. I told myself I still had time, that he'd cool down, that he'd eventually come home. But in the pit of my stomach, I already knew the truth. I had pushed him too far. And Rachel, she knew things. Things I had vented about Daniel in late-night conversations over wine. What if she told him? What if she had already said too much?
The thought haunted me.
Because if Daniel had finally heard the words I'd only dared say behind his back, then my marriage wasn't just broken. It was over. The days after Daniel left blurred together. The house felt like a museum of us. Frozen mugs in the sink, his jacket on the hook, the dent in his pillow still holding his shape. I kept telling myself he'd come back. That he just needed space. That this was just another argument, one of those rough patches couples eventually push through. But every time my phone buzzed, my heart would leap, only for it to sink again when it wasn't him. And then, 3 days later, my fear became reality. Rachel showed up at my door. She didn't even knock softly. She pounded like she had every right to walk in. And maybe she did. After all, she knew me better than anyone else. She'd been my confidant for years, the person I vented to whenever I felt trapped in my own marriage. But when I opened the door and saw her face, I knew. She had already spoken to Daniel. You told him, didn't you? I whispered, my voice cracking. Rachel crossed her arms, her jaw tight. He deserved to know the truth, Emily. You've been tearing him down for years, making him feel like he was asking for too much when all he wanted was to be loved back. Her words hit harder than I expected. Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. That wasn't your place, I snapped. You don't know what it's like living with him, always needing, always pressing. Needing what? She cut me off sharply. A little affection? A little respect? God, Emily, do you even hear yourself? You had a man who showed up for you every single day, and instead of appreciating it, you mocked him behind his back. Do you know how cruel that sounds? Do you know he used to sit in his truck outside your house at lunch just to hear your voice on the phone? He told me he waited for you to call first for once, and you never did. I froze. The memory of our late-night talks flooded back. The times I'd rolled my eyes and told her Daniel was too soft, or how he always wanted to cuddle when I just wanted to be left alone. I thought I was venting. I thought she was just listening. But now those words were weapons in her hands. Did you tell him everything? I asked, my throat tightening. Rachel hesitated, then sighed. I told him enough. Enough for him to see that it wasn't all in his head. That he wasn't crazy. That you stopped loving him a long time ago. My knees felt weak. I sank onto the couch, burying my face in my hands. You've ruined everything. No, she said quietly. You did that yourself. The silence that followed was suffocating. My chest burned with a mix of anger and shame. Anger at her for betraying me. Shame because, deep down, I knew she was right. But then she said something that made my blood run cold. Emily, is there someone else? I shot my head up, my heart pounding.
What? No.
Of course not. But the look on her face told me she didn't believe me. And maybe that's because, in some twisted way, she wasn't entirely wrong. There wasn't another man, not officially. But there was Ethan, a guy from the gym, who always seemed to notice me. He'd help me with my form, crack little jokes, compliment me when I wore my hair differently. It was harmless, wasn't it? I never crossed a line, but I danced close enough to it that guilt clung to me like smoke. Still, the way Rachel's eyes narrowed told me she suspected more. He mentioned Derek, she muttered, almost to herself. But I know the signs. You've been distant for too long for it to just be stress. My stomach twisted. If Daniel knew, if Rachel had hinted at even the possibility, then I wasn't just the wife who withheld affection. I was the wife who might have betrayed him completely. Rachel, please, I whispered, my voice breaking. Don't say anything else. I can fix this. I just need time. She shook her head slowly, pity in her eyes. Emily, he's already moved on from trying. I don't think there's anything left for you to fix. Her words echoed in my head long after she left. I sat in the empty house, shaking, replaying every mistake, every careless word, every cold shoulder. And mixed in now were flashes of who we'd been, singing in the car with the windows down, laughing so hard we cried, the quiet way he held my hand during scary movies. They came back like ghosts reminding me what I'd thrown away. And that's when it hit me. Daniel wasn't coming back. Not because of Rachel. Not because of Ethan. But because I had spent years killing our marriage one rejection at a time. And now, the only thing left was the hollow sound of my own regret. The next morning, I woke up to an emptiness I couldn't shake. The bed felt like a graveyard of everything I'd lost. Daniel's side was untouched, cold, like he'd been gone for years instead of days. I grabbed my phone, praying for a message. Something, anything that meant he was willing to talk. But instead, I saw what I'd been dreading. The joint credit cards? Cancelled. Our savings? Split, with half gone into another account. His number?
Blocked.
It was like he'd erased me overnight. I called anyway, desperate, hoping he'd unblock me. My calls went straight to voicemail. I drove to his buddy's house. No truck in the driveway. I even went to Rachel's, pounding on her door like a madwoman, but she didn't answer. Everywhere I turned, Daniel was gone. That afternoon, I finally found out where he'd been staying, an Airbnb on the edge of town. I don't even know how I got the address. Maybe Rachel slipped. Maybe I pieced it together through sheer desperation. But when I pulled up, my stomach dropped. His truck was parked outside. I stood at the door, my hand hovering over the wood, heart racing. For the first time in years, I wasn't the one rejecting him. I was the one begging silently to be let in. I knocked.
Once. Twice.
Again. Daniel, it's me. Please, can we just talk? No answer. I pressed my forehead against the door, tears streaming down my face. I didn't mean for it to get this bad. I didn't mean to push you away. Just open the door. Please. But he never did. Through the thin curtains, I thought I saw a shadow move.
He was there.
He knew I was standing outside, breaking apart. And still, he wouldn't let me in. For a brief, bitter second, I wanted to be angry, to call him stubborn, unfair. But the truth came crashing back. He wasn't shutting me out. He was protecting himself from the woman who'd already hollowed him out once. That silence was louder than any words he could have said. I drove home that night in a daze, headlights blurring through tears. The house felt colder than ever. Every corner reminded me of him, his tools in the garage, the faint smell of his cologne, the echo of his laugh tucked into the walls. But he wasn't coming back. Not this time. And then, a week later, the letter arrived. Divorce papers. Clean, sharp, final. I sat at the kitchen table staring at them, my hands trembling. Part of me wanted to rip them up, run to him, scream until he listened. But another part of me knew this was the bed I had made. I had called him needy. I had rolled my eyes at his love. I had flinched from his touch, laughed at his loyalty, and secretly daydreamed about men like Ethan who gave me attention without responsibility. And in the end, Daniel had given me exactly what I had been acting like I wanted.
Distance. Space.
Freedom. But standing in that empty kitchen, the silence pressing in, I finally understood the cruel truth. Freedom doesn't feel like freedom when the one person who loved you stops loving you back. Daniel had chosen himself, and for once, he was right too. Because I had taken steady, unconditional love and treated it like a burden. I had broken a man who only wanted to hold me. And now, I was the one left holding nothing. If you've listened this far, I want to leave you with a question. Stories like this aren't just stories. They're reminders of how fragile relationships can be when care and communication fade. Daniel's choice to walk away wasn't sudden. It was the result of years of quiet pain, unnoticed efforts, and emotional walls built one brick at a time. So, I want to ask you, if you were in Daniel's place, the husband, what would you have done? Would you have stayed longer, tried harder, or left sooner? And if you were Emily, the wife, what choices would you have made differently before it was too late? Your thoughts might help someone else reading this right now. Share them.
Think about them.
Because sometimes, it only takes one honest conversation, one act of kindness, to save something you can't replace once it's gone.